In this video, we're going to be starting to use SketchUp to create something that looks a little bit like a house. So I'm going to take you through some of the steps that will make that as easy as possible for you. So what I suggest you do to start with is begin with a rectangle, and we'll consider this to be the outside of the house. So I'm going to click and I'll drag that one out. Now it's going to be a very small house, so we're not too worried about the fact that the scale with this lady here is going to be way off. All right, so what I might do, because she won't be needed for this lesson, is I'm going to select and delete her. Now, what I'll do is I'll pan over and use my orbit with my middle mouse button just to get a little bit better positioned. I might actually look directly down on the top. And even after playing around with SketchUp for many years, I always still get a little bit surprised about how far something extends in the distance until you look at it directly from the top. So this has ended up being a lot longer than what I planned, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some lines using my pen tool, and I'm going to create some extra lines on the top of this rectangle. Now you can see here that my line is coming up green, which means it's going exactly along my green axis, which is fantastic. It's exactly what I want. And I'm going to click on the edge there. So that's going to seal that off. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'll go on the edge here, but this time my line is red, because if I guess zoom out a little bit, you can see my red axis goes along that line there. So I'll zoom back in. And this time I'm going to stop it on the edge of that one. I don't need it to go right to the edge, not for what I'm doing in this purpose anyway. And this time I'll go along here, and this will all start making sense. Now I can't get to the edge, so I'm going to press Shift and my middle tool while I'm drawing my line, and then let go of them. And that works fine. It'll let you do that midway through using a tool. And the last one is I'll go from here to here. All right, now I can use my pen tool and I can delete lines. So it won't consider this to be all, or this entire line here. It doesn't consider it all to be together now because I've got a line that intersects it. So as soon as you've got one line like this that's joining onto this line over here, it effectively splits this into two separate entities. That's really handy for us because it means that I can select and delete and get rid of that part of a line without using any additional tools. I can do the same thing here, and I'll pan down and I'll do the same thing here and the same thing here. Now, what I'm essentially doing is I'm doing a plan of this very small house. So these are going to be the walls, and this is going to be the internal. So what I'm going to do is do one extra wall on the inside, and we won't worry too much about it. We'll leave a bit of a gap so there's room for our virtual people to walk around in. And again, we're going to clean it up before we take it any further. We'll get rid of that line. So we've got this one section of a wall, and it will make way more sense by the time I've actually turned this into 3D. There's one last thing I want to do, and that is, with my pen tool still, I'm going to put in what would be the equivalent of a door. So I've got one line there, and I'll do another line just here. So if everything's done correctly, I should now be able to delete this little line. I'll zoom in a bit. And you can see it's gotten rid of the fill because it can't have a filled area there without that line. And I'm going to get rid of this one, this line as well. Now, as soon as I press delete, it's going to empty out all of the floor space in here, which is it's what I'm after really. So press delete, and there we go. We've now got this flat, weird looking shape, which we're going to turn into 3D. So by using the push-pull tool, as soon as I hover over it, it shows me that this is an area that I can use the push-pull tool on because it's got that speckled little feature that pops up every time my mouse goes over it. And then I can drag it up, and suddenly it starts looking a lot more like the internal components of a house. So this is a process we're going through, and if you find that part of your house hasn't extended up, so if I was to go back to where it was before, you might find that you've left one of your lines connecting there. So if I was to put a line back in, you'll see what I mean. I'll draw a line from here to here, and then if I try and use my push-pull this time, it'll only do the outside part. Now, that's not the end of things. You can actually do a nice little feature that will fix things up, and that is you can click up here. Now, I've left click and I've let go straight away, so it means that I'm not currently pressing down any of the buttons on my mouse. and it allows me to snap to the height of that wall, and then I can left click and that will make that extra wall exactly the same height. And then from that point on, you can then delete, and we probably need to do it on the bottom as well. I know, so you can see that's treated that as being hollow, which is okay for this task. All right, so that tidies that up. So what we're effectively trying to do is minimize and get rid of as many extra lines in there that we don't need. So we've got this nice little feature that looks like the outside or the walls of a house. Now, we got rid of the floor before, and we're going to add that back in now. So I'm going to zoom out, and we're going to flip this over, and we're going to look at it from the bottom so that we can see the corners on opposite sides. So basically I want to be able to see this corner and this corner, or this one and this one. Either is fine, because what I'm going to do is grab a rectangle. I'm going to snap to that endpoint there, and then when I move my mouse, I want to snap to this endpoint, and when I click, you can see that it's put the floor back in, which is perfect. All right, so now I've got a floor, which would mean that I could go over to my materials and I could give that a color, and I could say I want that floor to be red, which is a rather disgusting color for this floor, but it gives you the idea that you can now control this and manipulate it. So this would be how you do the basics of a house. The other thing that's a really handy feature is how to put in a window. And what I'd like you to try and follow is this process here, where I'm going to put a window, and we'll say that it's, okay, we're on the face, we'll click, and we're going to have a nice window that goes from here to the outside. Now, if I was to look on the outside, you'll notice I can't see the window because I've only drawn that rectangle on one face. So I need to get it to match exactly on the other side here where the window is, and the easiest way to do that is to make the most of our axes that we've got. Now the red one is the one that's going to be extending directly out that way. So what I'm going to do is use my pen tool again, click on the endpoints of each corner of the rectangle and draw a line, and make sure that as I move it around, I don't want it to be blue, it means it's going straight up. I want it to be red. And so sometimes you have to move it around a few times until it gets in the right angle. Now you can see it's trying to draw another line here. I don't want it to, so I can press escape, and that gets rid of that. And I do another line from this corner, out, escape, this line, out, and again escape, and the last corner, out, and escape. Now, when we look on this side, you can see that they're coming out for the four corners, and we're going to see a new little visual aid that we haven't seen before. In just a second, I'll go onto my rectangle tool, and this time when I try and snap, it comes up with a little cross, and it tells us it's an intersection point. Now this means that it's exactly where a line comes through a solid surface face like what we've got. So that's exactly where I need to be. I click on that one, I go down to the bottom one, and I click, and then we will have the rectangles on exactly the same point on both the inside and the outside. It's time to do a little bit of tidying up. So I'm going to get my arrow tool, and I'm going to select each of these and delete them. So select them just one click each time. And what I can do now is, this is probably the coolest bit I reckon, is I can select this face, delete it, and straight away, okay, I've got my window, and I've got my windowsill that's built in because I put those lines in there, so it's actually ended up making these extra internal parts of my window, which is a really nice feature. And then just like anything else, you can then go through, and we might want to give it a bit of a light blue color so it looks a bit more like a window. And if we look on this side, it hasn't painted it, so we've got to paint it on the other side as well. And so there we've got our version of a window that's working for our house. So we've made a flat house plan. We've made it as simple as possible by deleting any extra lines that weren't required. We've dragged that up into the air, and then we've put a rectangle with those little extra lines, which we can call construction lines because they're just there to help us out with lining things up. And then we've done some painting, and we've got this nice little simple, clean looking version of a house. So, as is the case with all the stuff in SketchUp that you're seeing in these movies, please try this out yourself and see if you can make your own version of this. These skills are really important because these are the ones you're going to be building on for when we get to the assignment. Okay, good luck.